So what happens when you combine the instrumental technicalities of Between the Buried and Me with the ferocity of Protest the Hero and the off-the-wall craziness of Omnirod and Others by No One? Well, you might very well get one of the most unexpected, exciting and overlooked albums of the year. Guys, gals and non-binary pals, my name is Ian, this is Rhyme Signatures, and we're once again opening the lid on the best new releases in prog rock and metal. Right, let me be the first to say that there's a darn good reason why I make sure I listen to basically everything that you guys recommend to me, which is why I want to extend a hand of thanks to YouTube user Uneasy Monkey for pointing me in the direction of this altogether rather extraordinary release that I would probably have otherwise easily missed. And I felt it was my duty and my privilege to shine my own personal spotlight onto this band, onto this album, as quite frankly this is one of the year's true uncovered gems, and one that I feel the extreme prog metal community would be doing very well to be talking more about. What we've got here is some of the finest melodic work, some of the sickest and most uncomfortable dissonance, some of the coolest contrasts, and some of the most creative implementation of unexpected sounds and instrumentation I've heard in a while. And I've very quickly become quite obsessed with this album. And I'm hoping that I can convince you, dear viewer, to do what I did after Uneasy Monkey urged me towards this release. So who are these guys? Effectively serving as a two-piece, with the majority of the instruments and vocals being performed by one Russell Eck, and the drums and some of the remaining vocals being rounded out by Jared Klein, whose name some of you might recognise from the altogether rather brilliant band Rivers of Nihil. The band also brings along a slew of guest stars smattered around the record to fill things out and add a little bit of textural variety where it's needed. Now, the history of the band actually stretches back as far as 2008, but they did disband shortly after their debut album came out in 2010, before reforming in 2013, and now in 2024 they dropped what can only be described as a true opus of progressive death metal, and I'm very excited for you all to discover this one as I have done. So strap in and let's talk a little bit about why I've fallen so hard for this record. Right, one thing I've always been a fan of is when an album that's otherwise full of in-your-face musical extremism is when it leads you in with something gentle, delicate, almost soothing really. Which is exactly what the band does on opening track Red Mother Blue Sun, with this incredibly gorgeous, really addictive vocalization. It sounds like a haunted lullaby or the intro to a psychological horror film, and it's an incredible mood setter for the album. Now get used to that melody too, as it's not the only time it shows up during the record, almost feeling like it's the signature calling card of the whole album. A crash of thunder, dark synthwave tones, and an ethereal mood brings up echoes of, I don't know, Dream Theater's A Nightmare to Remember, and it isn't long before the meat of the album's sound kicks in, with dark, throaty vocals and manic instrumentation being the order of the day. It is giving me immediate vibes to Alaska era Between the Buried and Me, but with the more eclectic sounds and instrumental quirkiness that would become more prevalent on albums like The Great Misdirect. There's an absolute whirlwind of sounds on this opening track, really showing off the instrumental chops of everyone involved. The guitar tone is thick and meaty, the drums dive and bounce around like a caffeinated child with a turbocharged pogo stick, and it makes for one of the most explosive, captivating and instantly enjoyable openers of the year. I love how much the album is at a near constant state of acceleration, you know. No sooner has the first track ended than we are blasted into another whirling dervish of a song in the form of the title track. This one's a bit more deliberate and focused feeling though, and it does give us the first taste of the more melodic and softer side that the band also flirts with. Again, it's remarkably similar to that kind of Great Misdirect or Coma Ecliptic BTBAM, but with a slightly more playful and whimsical tone in places. The clean vocals are absolutely pivot on a dime, head-turningly distracting, given the monstrously gruesome nature of the bread and butter growls. But this is in a really good way. They have this kind of, I don't know, fresh-faced innocence to them, feeling both out of place but incredibly soothing, forming a kind of healing balm to the extremities of the music leading up to this point. And honestly, that's really the album in a nutshell. It does this remarkable job of seesawing between moments of instrumental and vocal insanity with the kind of guitar work that could blast the wimples off a convent of nuns with its sheer ferocity, before quirky keyboards, weird time signatures, and playful folktale vocalisms soothe the areas of your brain that are almost at sensory overload. It's that kind of demented interplay between light and shade that I love so much, and the band aren't afraid to get really, really weird in places. Third track of White Myth of the Monolith is the first real taste of just how strange the music can get, and obviously as a result it's an easy highlight of the album and a big favourite of mine. It's like being body slammed by a Care Bear into a vat of honey filled with bees that have been forced to listen to a Michael Bublé Christmas album in the middle of July. The album's structure is great too, feeling neither too long nor too short at a tiny 49 minutes or so over 9 tracks, with the majority ranging between that sort of 5 to 8 minutes long, so there's plenty of space and scope for all the ideas presented on here to feel fully fleshed out and interesting. Now, if the measure of an album's greatness is how often I've listened to it before committing the figurative pen to paper for scripting this review, then The Mountains of Melancholia is truly one of the best of the year, as it took me around a full 20 spins to fully unpack my thoughts on this record, and why writing this darn thing has taken me about 5 days rather than my usual 2. There's just, I don't know, there's just so much going on that it's almost impossible for me to unpack all my thoughts without devolving into speaking in tongues or something. So yes, for all of my praise, the album's strengths can also be seen in some places as its downfall. It can be hard to say at times who this album is really going to appeal to, as you've got to be a very particular kind of crazy to pass the vibe check here. This is a Tasmanian devil kind of crazy. This is a Pandora's box of madness, and not everyone is going to be able to keep up the pace with this. For example, the trumpet solo in Wandering Wayfarer's Woe is one of my favourite moments on any album in 2024, but a lot of death metal fans might be thinking, what the bloody hell is this doing in my breakdown-laden blast beat festival? You know, and I totally get that the level of throwing everything including the kitchen sink into the mixing bowl is not gonna be for everyone. Sometimes you just want your death metal to beat you about the head without playing any real funny tricks on you, and you know, I get that. I do want that at times as well. In fact, the more I think about it, if you've ever seen the movie Scrooged, you know, the Bill Murray Christmas Carol adaptation, you know, absolute banger of a holiday movie, but if you've seen it, then this album is basically the musical equivalent of The Ghost of Christmas Present. She's all sweetness and nice, but will just as happily kick you with the force of a cannonball to the crotch and laugh sweetly at you as you keel over in agony. It is also incredibly similar to middle era Between the Buried and Me, as I've already mentioned, almost to a fault. I can practically hear the vocals in Tommy Rogers' distinctive gruff delivery, and even the guitar tone echoes that of Paul Wagner at times. The weird segues, the quirky instrumental breaks, the structuring and tone, it's all incredibly familiar. And while I wouldn't necessarily say that this familiarity is a bad thing, it does maybe hold the album back a little bit due to it feeling a little less individual than it otherwise could be. And honestly, it's really weird to say that, as this album does so much to stand out from the crowd in a year full of largely similar sounding records, but in doing so manages to sound dramatically like one of its chief influences. But in the absence of any new material from Between the Buried and Me since like 2021 or whatever it is, and no news yet of anything else coming, this will certainly do nicely as an interim piece, and heck, if you want to think of this album actually as a Between the Buried and Me one, then frankly it's up there in terms of quality with the likes of The Great Misdirect and Alaska, which is no mean feat in and of itself. And sink your head in the clouds. No one can. So, what else can I possibly say about Luck Won't Save You's Through the Mountains of Melancholia? I love surprises, especially musical ones, and this has certainly been the release of the year that I've found to be the most disarmingly excellent. I've always been a huge fan of progressive metal that goes out of its way to be strange, as it honestly reminds me a lot of myself personality-wise. I'm an odd biscuit, and believe me, those of you who are unfortunate enough to know me in person will know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's this precise kind of fearless statement to make music that's clearly been made for the love of making music that speaks to me so much here. Who cares about accessibility? We've got flamenco guitar interludes between blast beat drums and chiptune instrumental breakdowns before unleashing a scream to awaken the dead from the pits of hell itself. I've had an absolute blast with this album. It is certain to feature on my year-end list, and I would urge everyone to give this a go, especially if you're a fan of progressive death metal that pushes the envelope in terms of what is traditionally expected from the genre. Now, I would be recommending a physical purchase here, but it's currently digital only. But it's pay what you want on Bandcamp, so, for goodness sakes, go and check this out. There's no excuse. There's also even an instrumental-only version of the album if the vocals aren't your thing, so really, there's no excuse, Go listen to this right now and surrender yourself to the kind of fresh-faced madness that keeps music alive and interesting. This is all, of course, guys, just my opinion, so if you loved or if you hated this one, please talk to me about your experiences with the album in the comments down below. Please do drop me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Please even consider subscribing to the channel if you've been enjoying my particularly irreverent form of content. And until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.